Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kate Almond, and today I'm going to give an update on stocks, and specifically my outlook going into, getting near quarter four of the year. And so some of the things I want to discuss about is what I expect for Bitcoin, what I expect for stocks in general, and then what I expect for oil. So those are some of the things we're going to discuss. So what do I think is going to happen with most stocks, including Bitcoin? My general thoughts is that, for the next month, we might see the S&P 500 and most cryptos and stocks in general trend upwards for the month of July specifically. But I think going into quarter four this year, what I expect to have happen is the S&P 500 drop into Q4. So, maybe something like this. Maybe not that hard, but I do think we'll go down a little bit, and then from here probably up, like normal. And that's sort of my thought process. But why am I assuming the stock market is going to go down, right? Because if you look at the S&P 500, let's take it like a sort of a 20-year look. If you look at the S&P 500, it kind of just goes up, right? So what's my thought process behind this sort of sudden drop? The reason why I think we're likely in for a temporary drop, there's three particular reasons. One reason we can look at is normal midterm year behavior. Okay, so if we go to the next midterm year, we're going to look over here, right? 2022, this is a midterm year. This is also a midterm year. And what do we see during this midterm year? The first quarter of the year was negative, and going into, quarter four, another negative drop, right? What did we see over here in Q1? Oh, would you happen to notice we had a negative Q1, right? So this lines up, these two line up. But if we even go back further, let's look at 2018, for example. Another midterm year. And what did we see during 2018? Quarter one, a drop in the S&P 500. And going into Q4, another drop. So, we've already had this drop this year. It seems like we're still waiting. But this is just two midterm years, right? This is two midterm years. Well, if we go back to 2016, well, wouldn't you notice, this is, 2016 I said. We saw a drop in Q1, right there, and a drop in Q4, 2016. So those two drops are pretty common in midterm years. Even if we want to go back into 2012, the midterm year, drop right there, drop into quarter one. So it just seems like natural behavior. And then obviously, if we go back, I think 2008 was an election year, so that wasn't a midterm year, but 2006, yeah, you've seen this pattern play out pretty commonly for the last few election years. And I think the thing that's pretty convincing to me is not only does this pattern naturally behave, but we played out one part of the pattern, which is a weak quarter one. And if we're kind of looking too, we're starting to see some weakness already. I mean, if you look at this, we're not in Q4 yet, but we do see some weakness. But here's the thing that's sort of important to also look at. So not only from a pattern base, right? If you were just look at patterns, okay, we usually go down, right? Just off a pattern basis. But just look at the price, right? Let's look at the price. Here's something else we can look at. And if we look at the price, what we'll notice is that we really haven't been doing too much for the last 2 months basically. For the last 2 months, we've been pretty flat. If you notice, we had a few months last year which were flat, and this ended up causing the market to go down. If we look over here, when the market was flat, it eventually went down. Over here as well, during this midterm year, the market was flat. ended up coming down, right? So you're usually seeing kind of these areas of low price movement, right? When the price really doesn't do anything for too long, the market seems to like to go down, right? You can look at some of these examples I just showed. There's not too many examples where if the market just does nothing for several months, it goes up, right? Most commonly, when the market does nothing, eventually it collapses. So not only from a, if we look at it on a time basis, right? What does the S&P 500 usually do in the third quarter? It usually goes down, right? But on top of that, we kind of see price stagnation. And usually this is a pattern of also a drop in the price. And the last thing is, too, is I think there's some news that, the Iran war is still going on. So you kind of have a pretty scary thing going on where, oil, if we look at the price of oil, too, here's something that, by the way, this is more speculation. So let's look at U.S. oil specifically, U.S. oil. You can see right here, the price of oil has dropped down a lot, right? It's been dropping down. And, oil usually follows supply and demand, right? If supply goes up, we expect the price to go down, right? The thing that's kind of weird looking at just U.S. oil prices is, has the supply gone up? Well, actually, we're still in the Iran war, right? So the Strait of Hormuz is still blocked. So actually, the supply has been going down, but the price has been going down, right? Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why is the price coming down when the supply of oil is going up, right? Which should make it more valuable, and therefore the price should go up. So, to me, obviously, what I'm thinking is, it's kind of hard for people to really look, but if you kind of notice, just look at these bars for a second. These bars represent the price of oil. If you notice, there's something called a fair value gap right here. And I would encourage you to look at this, but basically, when the price of something jumps too fast, like this price here, it's usually a bad sign when you have these big, large candles. Because what it usually means is the price increased too much at one time, where people were still wanting to buy oil at this price. So because people want to buy oil at this price, and who are unable to buy oil at this price, typically things tend to go down back into this area. But now that we're here, my thought process is the thing that's likely. This is all speculation, dubious speculation. But now that we've kind of come back here, and we're probably going to see more buying pressure. And like I said, the supply of oil has not been going up, right? The supply of oil has been going down. So in reality, the price should be going up. And one thing it is this is a CME gap, what it's called, when the price increases too much. I would, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, a CME gap, or a trading gap, I think you can look it up, a CME gap. Usually the price eventually comes back down to fill out all the orders that people wanted to buy at, and usually eventually goes back up. And this would kind of line up with what I'm saying is that the Iran war is still going on. We're not getting more supply. Supply's been going down, right? So the price should be going up. I just think because we have this CME gap is probably what's been pulling the price down, because more people want to buy in eventually. So if we see, let's just look at oil compared to the S&P 500. So let's quickly remove all the drawings. Let's add the S&P 500. You can see right here when oil started going up, right? Oil started going up, the S&P 500 went down, right? And look what happened as oil went down. The S&P 500 went up, right? It kind of has an inverse relationship. I mean, if oil really starts to track up again, I would expect the S&P 500 to come down. And I think that's likely what's going to happen, in my view. I think it's likely, especially because the Iran war is not finished, oil is going to hit an all-time high. So this is my third reason why I think the S&P 500 is going to go down, is because of oil, right? So the three reasons why I think we're going to have a weak S&P 500 is because normally it goes down in the fourth quarter of a midterm year. So that's usually what happens on a midterm year basis. But also we can see the price has been stagnating and not really doing anything for several months, which is likely going to cause more selling as we continue. And that's a pattern that you see common throughout here. And then number three is we also have macroeconomic factors that will likely push the price down. So for those three reasons, I'm expecting a significant drop going into Q4 this year. And so, this is obviously speculation, not financial advice, but I would expect XLE, which is an energy ETF. I think I've discussed about this before, but I don't know what's going on with my thing. But I would expect XLE to come back up in the next, Q4 this year, which is probably where you would want to sell actually, because oil prices like this are not good for economies, the global economies. The U.S. might deal with these prices, the prices of energy, for a short-term basis, right? But the longer energy stays up, it hurts everyone in the economy, and it's bad for politicians, right? Because they're usually, when oil goes up, inflation goes up. When inflation goes up, approval ratings go down, right? Presidents, politicians, they don't like inflation. They don't like when energy prices are high. It usually hurts politicians. So, even though we might see it go up, there's going to be pressures eventually to ease it back down. Eventually. But that's sort of my thought process. I'm not sure if XLE is a good buy here necessarily, but I think going into Q4, it's likely going to come back to these all-time highs. That's sort of my thought process. And I do expect the S&P 500 to go down. One important thing to note, actually, if you go back for the last 10 years and look at the month of July, the month of July has always been a positive month. So even though you should expect it's likely that there's going to be a crash going to Q4 this year, I do think for January we'll come back up eventually. And so, yeah, but if this market does drop, if we do see one of these drops right here, you can probably find most stocks. Most stocks are going to be a good buy, but I particularly think Bitcoin is going to be a good buy. I also am bullish on SpaceX, actually. I think SpaceX, I don't even know what the ticker is. Okay, so this SpaceX, I might buy a little bit, not a lot. Obviously not financial advice. And then, just crypto broadly. Not great to put it, but I think those are things that you could probably look for when the S&P 500 goes down. Because like a lot of things I discussed on this channel, if we look at midterm years for Bitcoin, we can highlight some midterm years over here. And what you tend to notice actually is for non-midterm years, like look over here, Bitcoin tends to go up, right? Over here, Bitcoin tends to go up, and these are non-midterm years, right? Over here, Bitcoin's just going up. And if you look at midterm years, that's actually where most of the time Bitcoin spends going down. So what's kind of funny about this is I'm saying there's supposed to be market weakness sometime in Q4, right? And if that market weakness played out, that would sort of play into the thought process that this is still going to happen, right? Bitcoin's still going to go down into Q4 this year and probably actually start making its way up after it's spent a full year going down, right? right here is a full year going down. Right there is a full year going down. You know, Bitcoin's been going down since hit a high in October, and since October 8th, it's just been going down, right? So it's kind of funny how those two things actually line up. What Bitcoin has done in the future, what its most obvious pattern is doing, is going down, right? It's supposed to go down in Q4 and then start trending up, which is pretty funny to me that that's likely what the S&P 500 is also going to be doing. So, yeah, I think for the short term, though, the month of July, Bitcoin will probably be up. I think XLE, like I've discussed on this channel, you know, I was saying that XLE tends to be a good stock, especially for recessions. But it's likely XLE might come down a little bit. And it might not be a bad time to buy XLE. If you look really quick, though, you know, if you look at these bull and bear bands, I mean, if you look, every single time we've touched these, XLE's kind of been going up, right? It's been staying strong for a year. And if you look, XLE has just touched it, right? And every single time it's touched it, I mean, you can look, it's gone up, right? So I think it's just a matter of time for XLE to make its triumphant return back up. At least back to all-time highs. That's what I'm thinking. It'll at least go to all-time highs. So right now it's close to, you know, $50. I think it'll go back to that $60 mark eventually. And then who knows what's going to happen from there, right? I don't really know what's going to happen from there. But, yeah, I mean, if you just look at XLE, I mean, look at when it's kind of touched these lines, right? It's not always been a terrible time to buy XLE once it hits these lines. So, at least over here, it's been good. I think why XLE has done so bad actually over here is because we had strong economic forces, but for the past few years, you know, things haven't been great. Interest rates are up, unemployment's been going up. You have inflation going up. So I think for a lot of those reasons, XLE tends to do stronger in these macroeconomic sort of conditions that we're in. Because if you look over here, you know, XLE just stayed below these bands, right? But if you kind of just look over here, I mean, XLE likes to spend time above it. So, anyways, those are sort of a few things I want to discuss. I don't expect XLE to really do anything for July. It's even possible XLE goes below these bands, right? So, it's probably, it's most likely, but eventually, you know, going to Q4, it'll make its way back up. And then what it does from there, I'm not too sure, but it's likely going to start coming down if this war is resolved. Yeah, and so, anyways, that's kind of what I think people should expect. What I think is likely to play out. And, you know, if there is this drop, though, I think there's a lot of good stocks that you can buy on a dip. You know, you can think about buying Google, right? If you look at Google, look how, you know, good it's done for the last few years. To me, you know, let's look at 2020, right? In 2020, it was at $50. Right now, it's at $300, right? So Google's no joke. And if we look at these bands, you can see we're getting pretty close to touching them. What does that mean, right? What happens, do you think, with Google once we touch them? I mean, it doesn't, to me, it's not like a rocket science. Let's just look at all the areas where it kind of touched the band and what happened, right? Didn't stay there for long. That's all I'll say. So, you know, Google's coming down these bands. If there's a drop in Q4, you know, would Google be a good buy? I suppose that's up for you to decide. You know, there's also ASML, which is, I think, another great stock. There's some other ones. There's Coherent. This stock, I don't know if I would touch as much because look at how high it's gone in the past year. But, you know, there's some good stocks I would look through. And, you know, the last stock I might just show off is Coca-Cola. Let's see, where is that stock? I should probably add a searching feature, actually. But, you know, if you look at 2020, it was at $20, right? Right now, it's at like $180. So, pretty decent in 6 years, from going from $20 to $100, almost $200. It's a 10x almost. Not bad. So I think there'll be some stocks that are on discount, especially once we have this drop that, you know, you can kind of look into. Yeah, but I think out of all the stocks, you know, Bitcoin, SpaceX, and just broadly more cryptos. I'll discuss more. I'll make more videos on crypto coming up here, but I think these are the things that are going to catch my eye a little bit more. But, you know, I would expect some weakness, and then you can go and pick up some stocks you like. It probably could be a good time. The last thing I'll kind of discuss before I get going here is, if you look at this chart named the business cycle, right here, this seems like this chart has not done a bad time, not been too bad at calling recessions, right? If we look over here, we had the recession 2008 when this indicator really started to drop off down. When it started to really plummet just straight down, this was one recession, right? Look at the COVID recession. Once this went down, right here was a recession. And early 2000s, once this really started to plummet down, that was also a recession. And you can see we were trending down eventually, started coming back up, but the minute this starts coming down, it's always ended up in a recession. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's a matter of time when this really starts to come down. Who knows when it'll come down, right? But usually when this comes down, there's a recession, so you want to be prepared for that eventually when it comes down the pipeline. I made some videos on GD. This looks like one stock that tends to do pretty good during recessions. I discussed XLE. This stock tends to hold up during recessions. You have some other ones. I think Moss was another one that actually went up during recessions. I think sometimes. So anyways, yeah, those are some things to think about. Are we having a recession in this Q4? No idea. I'm not sure. I can't tell you. It's possible, but it's tricky because it would contradict what Bitcoin usually does, right? Bitcoin usually finds a bottom in midterm year. And actually, if we look at just Bitcoin, I guess I will discuss this. I said that was the last thing I was going to discuss, but I was lying. If we just look at Bitcoin, you know, this is on a weekly chart, but something you can notice is over here, this was a recession. I think there's something over here where you had a pretty brutal drop. I'm trying to think exactly what it was. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. I mean, here's one recession. Yeah, there wasn't too many bad. I mean, this was pretty tough over here. I don't think that was a recession. But I mean, even if you had bought Bitcoin at its, when you're, you know, out there at topped, you can see, you know, during that recession, I mean, a few months later, Bitcoin was at its all-time high again. And it didn't even go past the bottom low. Do you see that? It was at $4,000 here. It bottomed at $3,000. So even with the recession, I mean, Bitcoin was still up. And actually, a few months later, it's just back to normal. So I think Bitcoin can be strong during recessions as well. It's hard to say though. But yeah, I think that's sort of everything I really want to speak about. So this might have been something as well, actually, a pretty distinct drop. So Bitcoin does tend to can have pretty brutal midterm years drops. So, you know, it would make sense for Bitcoin to bottom. I don't know how low it's gonna go. Actually, I should be more judicious, but it might go, you know, low, go up, and then have a mid-cycle drop, and then continue its whatever it's doing. And this could probably mark a recession. You know, later down the pipeline. But yeah, it's hard to say. Who knows? I couldn't tell you, but I think it's possible when looking at this indicator. But yeah, anyways, I hope you found that helpful. That's all I discussed today. This is why I think the S&P 500 is going to go lower into Q4 this year, and that it probably is going to be a good opportunity to start buying some stocks that you like. You know, I try to put some good stocks I have on here on the website. You can find this website at almondinvest.com. let's see. Yeah, you can find the website at almondinvest.com and look through some of these assets and do your own research. So that's all I discussed. Thanks so much and have a wonderful evening.